tomorrow night. The Sixers are back. They take on the Bulls. You can hear the game right here on 97.3 ESPN. You can also watch it on ESPN television. Just like last night, Dave Pasch, Doris Burke had the call as the Sixers kind of grinded out late to beat the Nets. But what was so impressive about the way they were able to finish that game off? Dave Pasch called the action for ESPN. He'll also have the call tomorrow night on ESPN TV for Sixers Bulls. He had a front row seat for it all, and we welcome him here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Dave, welcome to the show. How are you?
How you doing?
We're doing good. So you had a front row seat last night to see this Sixers team in action. Probably one of the more polarizing teams in the league, I guess. When you get a chance to travel around the league, what goes on in Philly has to be one of the more interesting stories from every time you get a chance to see them up close.
No doubt. I love doing games here. The fans are so into it. They care so much. It's funny at the end of the game to hear fans behind us trying to call out plays, telling guys what to do. I mean, if I'm hearing it, the players got to be able to hear it. It's great. And, I know that there are people critical of Ben Simmons last night because he didn't shoot in the fourth quarter, but, they don't win the game without Ben Simmons passing and facilitating. So it's a fun place to do a game. And I get it. I love the passion that the fans here have about their sports teams.
Yeah, now, Dave, I wanted to ask you about that because I heard you bring that up during the game last night, was that, hey, Ben hasn't taken a shot in the fourth quarter, but you also commented how even though he hasn't taken a shot, you felt that his impact was still maybe the most impactful guy on the floor.
Well, he did have 5 assists in the fourth quarter, and, his energy, his ferocity with how he gets into the front court and setting people up, and also his defense. You have to credit him for that. I think it's rare that you have a point guard that plays an entire quarter in the fourth quarter and doesn't take a shot. But, what's the best thing for the Sixers? Well, last night the best thing was for him to pass. Now, if, Tobias Harris and other guys are not making shots from the perimeter, Korkmaz hit a couple in the fourth quarter. If they're not making those, well, then it's probably a different story. You have to be able then to get your shot and be able to be aggressive offensively. But he's shown he can do that. He did that in the first quarter. I mean, it was all about attacking the rim early on. The question with Ben's always going to be, if he has to beat you from the outside in the fourth quarter, is he going to try and do that? It's not can he do it, because, we really don't know. We just know percentage-wise it's not, that's not a good option. But will he even try? Will he try to beat you from the perimeter? It's really interesting without Joel Embiid, just kind of watching this team offensively. Brooklyn is making shots in the fourth quarter again. How does that change Simmons' role and his effectiveness? And we'll see against Chicago if that does change, because as long as Embiid is out, I think it's challenging. It's challenging defensively for them, but also in the fourth quarter offensively with Ben Simmons on the floor when the defense is packing it in.
Dave, I think you got to witness yesterday or last night in the first quarter just the Sixers and Ben Simmons in a nutshell. He was aggressive. He was very good on defense. He was great in transition. But the Sixers were 0 for 6, I believe, to start from the 3-point arc. So what did you see in that first quarter that maybe you didn't realize about the Sixers or anything that really stood out? Because Ben Simmons was aggressive early, shots struggled to go down.
Yeah, I guess, again, the thing that stood out was his aggressiveness and just him going to the basket and looking for a shot. And I think him realizing, hey, Joel's not here. I've got to get this thing going. I've got to be the guy offensively to set the tone. And he did that. And, eventually the shots are going to fall. I think they've got enough decent three-point shooters where, at some point they're going to go down. I was surprised a little bit at the defense and just how many threes they gave up. Leading the league and only giving up 10 threes a game. Brooklyn hit, I think half of that in the first quarter. So that was, that's how Brooklyn got the lead. And maybe they were a little in the fourth quarter. Brooklyn was a little tired, having played a back-to-back, and Kyrie Irving playing 30-plus minutes back-to-back nights. But it was a good win for Philly. They needed to get that win based on Brooklyn being in a back-to-back, and just try to hang on as long as they can until they get Embiid back.
I've been saying this for a while, Dave, and I want your thoughts after seeing it up close and personal. But Matisse Thybulle, for me, is someone that has been a pleasant surprise. I think a lot of people didn't realize the impact that he could have this early on in his career. He has defensive ability and skills that I don't think can be taught. And you saw his impact last night. I think he had 4 blocks just off of the standard defensive, playing his guy straight up. And he's very active. He leads rookies in steals. What are your thoughts on Matisse Thybulle?
Well, I'm a big fan. I covered him at Washington doing the Pac-12 games for ESPN for the last couple of years. And, the things I saw in college are what we're seeing now, a guy that can make the three, but he's a guy that's going to gamble defensively at times, but he's also going to, the block that he had from behind on Kyrie Irving, he did that all the time in the zone defense that Mike Hopkins plays at Washington, where he's playing on the top. Guys would get to the elbow, think they have a clean shot, and he comes from behind and blocks it. I mean, he's excellent at that. I think it was a great pickup by the Sixers because you can, play him with Simmons and Josh Richardson, and you can just switch. You can switch. Any of those guys can end up on anybody defensively and be okay. Some of that is Simmons' size. Some of that's Thybulle's length. So I think defensively, again, when they get Embiid back and they're whole, I think the Sixers are really good. The question for me still for Thybulle, for them, is, offensively. Last year in the playoffs, Jimmy Butler was the go-to guy. Is it going to be Tobias Harris now in late in games? Is it going to be Joel? You don't have J.J. Redick, who is the guy that can get you 3 when you need it. So those are the questions I have, and there's questions that, they can't be answered until we get into the playoffs.
Yeah, Dave Pasch, ESPN, tomorrow night, Sixers Bulls. You can watch that on ESPN television. He also had the call last night for Sixers and Nets. Now, I think we here have been critical of Ben and overly complimentary. But when you're watching him and you're in the heat of the moment calling the game, I was watching that game last night, and there's a moment where, Dave, you say, man, Ben Simmons at 23 is clearly the most impactful. He's the best player on the floor. And then there's other nights when that kind of just goes by the wayside. Is it, when you're like in that watching him play, is it interesting to see which Ben you're going to get and confusing all at the same time?
Yeah, it really is. And he is just 23. You made that point. He's got some room to grow. He missed his whole first year. So, it's not like he's a finished product. And, where is he going to be in a few years? Where is his maturity? Where is his attitude going to be in a few years? Obviously, they want him to shoot more from the perimeter. He's not doing that yet. So is that a confidence thing? Is that an unwillingness to grow your game? I don't know. You'd have to ask him. But it seems to me that he's got incredible raw talent, and he's so big and powerful. He's great with finishing with either hand. He does that as well as anybody in the league, especially at his size, that there's just this great room for growth for him over the next few years. So it's fascinating because I really want to see, if he does become a better shooter. I'm sure this is why the coaches want him out there more is, man, if he can become at least reliable to make one every now and then, boy, what does that do for your team? What does it do for him? But what does it do for your team? Because if you have to respect him there, there are times where Jared Allen, the center, is guarding him because you don't have to worry about him on the perimeter. Jared Allen was just sagging back.
Yeah.
So at what point does Ben say, you know what, I'm going to go out there and do it. I'm going to get the confidence to do it, or I'm going to take it seriously. And, hopefully for Sixers fans' sakes, that's sooner than later, because I'm fascinated to see what would happen if he really could expand his game.
Yeah, and look, when he played here in the summer league, he was shooting elbow jumpers, and he made a couple of mid-range shots, and that has just kind of gone away. But one thing I thought you highlighted a lot last night, Dave, and you get to see this when you're there as opposed to television a little bit more, is the power that he has, that I don't think – when people are critical of him, I don't think they understand how big and strong he is, and he's only 23, how much bigger and stronger and how difficult he is going to be to handle in the post and when he gets a little bit more polished in those areas.
Yeah, that is something that, I agree. I think, there are certain players or certain aspects of players that you really get an appreciation for when you're there, and just seeing his size and then watching how powerful he is. he's watching him against Jared Allen. I mean, you take away the hair that Jared Allen has, and they're basically the same size. Ben's actually a little bit bigger. So you're talking about a point guard against a center. And Ben's as big, if not bigger, and stronger. So it's a unique thing. There aren't many guys that have what Ben Simmons has. And that's why, again, I think it's so intriguing. What's the future for him? Is the future for him a better version of what he currently is, which is pretty good, right? He's got to lead the league in steals and, is one of the top guys in assists and a guy that can score 15 to 20, or is it a guy that can score 25 because now he's, extended his range?
What did you see from Al Horford last night? Because he's been someone that's polarizing, I think, so far during his time in Philadelphia. We were all very excited when they made the move to acquire him and bring him in. He was called on to be the potential leader of this team and this roster. But last night especially, Dave, he looked not himself through three quarters. I don't know if he's dealing with an injury that they haven't announced yet, but he just looked slower, not able to knock down shots, slow in the pick and roll on both sides of the ball. What did you see from him last night? And talk about his role and the importance of it for this team to make a run.
It's funny. You just sometimes you assume, well, they just had this piece, had that piece, and then boom, you're a championship contender. And you just don't know from a chemistry standpoint or, where a guy is physically or his skill set, really how things are going to work out. The Utah Jazz are playing their best basketball of the season right now, and Mike Conley has been out. They have been better without Mike Conley. Mike Conley got off to a slow start, and a lot of people thought that's such an easy fit. But maybe Donovan Mitchell's better playing point without Mike Conley on the floor, playing with Joe Ingles. Maybe the Horford Embiid thing isn't working the way people thought it would. Last night it was kind of a weird game watching him shoot threes. He just didn't seem to be as comfortable as we've seen him previously. He's going to be 30. He's 33, right? So it's, I don't know. It will be interesting when Embiid gets back to see how that fit really works and what really happens in the playoffs. I mean, maybe that's where everything comes together for this team because they have guys like Al Horford who are battle-tested in the postseason. But I thought it would be a smoother transition for him.
We'll leave you with this. Dave Pasch, ESPN. You mentioned fit and coming to one place and thinking. I'm wondering if after you left the Wells Fargo Center last night, if you saw the avalanche of Markelle Fultz highlights all over the place and how he kind of needed to get out of Philly to maybe resurrect himself. But pretty interesting story there.
Yeah, I did see the numbers. Yeah, and, again, doing the Pac-12 games for ESPN, I saw Markelle play a bunch that when he was there, and they were a bad team, and it was really hard to evaluate him then. And and how do you really know from a confidence standpoint where a guy is? Clearly, that was lacking. But you have to be happy for somebody that has been through what he's been through, struggling with his confidence to play the way he is right now. Is he ever going to live up to being a number one overall pick? Maybe not, but it's a step in the right direction. And I agree. I think the change of scenery was good for Markelle. Maybe just the fact that, Orlando, even though that's their one pro sports team, the fan base there is different than the fan base here. And maybe that is a place where he can excel because, there's less scrutiny than there is if you're playing in Philadelphia. So it's worked out so well, pretty well for him so far in Orlando.
All right, Dave Pasch, tomorrow night, it's Sixers and Bulls, and you can watch that on ESPN. Dave will have the call. You paired up with Doris tomorrow night as well?
Yep, DB will be there.
All right, Dave and Doris tomorrow night, and watch that ESPN, and he was kind enough to join us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Thank you so much, Dave.
You got it, fellas, anytime.
Yeah, and
Thanks, Dave.
Here's an interesting fact about Dave Pasch.
What's that?
So earlier this year, he is the voice of the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, I saw that on his Twitter bio.
He called the first half of the Cardinals game and then left the second half to go call an NBA game, a national game. But
Never heard of
he kept
that.
the streak alive of calling every single one of Larry Fitzgerald's games.
Very cool.